An elderly black woman, dressed simply, is mocked and scorned by a group of wealthy individuals who, upon looking at her faded dress and worn-out shoes, whisper cruelly about her poverty and skin color. Yet, they could never have imagined that behind her humble appearance lies a fortune that far exceeds theirs, along with a profound lesson in humility and the true value of a person, one they would never forget. This year's annual charity gala for Boston's elite takes place with a particularly extravagant scale, attracting the most powerful and wealthy figures in the city's white upper class. The gentlemen, dressed in elegant tuxedos, each tailored to perfection with intricate detailing, hold glasses of expensive champagne in their hands. Their eyes are confident, their voices refined, and their interactions polite but always seeming to assess each other's family backgrounds and social standing. They walk with grace and poise across the gleaming marble floor, exchanging courteous smiles and nods of pride. However, the most striking aspect of the scene is the procession of high society women, moving gracefully and proudly in their exclusive designer gowns. The ladies flaunt their beauty in opulent, colorful outfits crafted by some of the most renowned fashion designers in the world. Some dresses are adorned with dazzling Swarovski crystals, while intricate diamond jewelry sparkles brightly under the lights. Every piece of jewelry they wear, each ring, necklace, and pair of earrings, could easily purchase a middle-class family's home. At the center of the grand ballroom stands Catherine Winters, the most powerful, regal, and wealthy matron in the city, smiling with self-satisfaction. She adjusts her radiant sapphire necklace, the large stone cut exquisitely, perfectly complementing the custom-made blue gown that hugs her elegant curves. Surrounding her are close friends, Eleanor Madison, noble and graceful in a chic black dress, and Patricia Reynolds, charming in a luxurious navy dress with silver accents glowing under the lights. The entire ballroom exudes an air of sophistication, power, and opulence. The soft, refined sounds of classical music from a prestigious orchestra fill the space. The scent of expensive French perfume mixes with the air, amplifying the lavishness of the event. In this environment, pride is like an invisible force that permeates, clearly dividing the attendees by their social rank, wealth, and reputation. Everyone knows that this is not just an ordinary charity event. It is also a silent competition between Boston's top wealthy families to assert their superior position within the city's white upper class. Amidst this overwhelming scene of splendor, the large doors suddenly swing open, signaling the arrival of an unfamiliar figure, one seemingly out of place in this setting. Immediately, the atmosphere shifts ever so slightly, as all curious and scrutinizing eyes turn toward the entrance. As soon as the door creaked open, all eyes immediately turned toward the entrance. But instead of a famous figure, or a wealthy, powerful guest, as they had expected, the person who appeared in the doorway was an elderly black woman with silver-white hair, a small frame, and slightly hunched shoulders, entering with an oddly calm and slow pace. The old woman wore a faded beige dress, simple and in stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Her worn-out low shoes, a faded fabric handbag that had lost its color over the years, and her wrinkled hands gently gripping the handbag's strap, all created a sharp contrast against the extravagant atmosphere of the event. The hall was immediately filled with whispers of discomfort. The elegant ladies in their lavish gowns quickly glanced at each other, trying to hide their curiosity mixed with disdain through subtle frowns and tight-lipped smirks. Catherine Winters cast a glance toward the door, her smile fading and replaced by an unmistakable look of displeasure. "Oh my God, did she get lost or something?" Eleanor whispered, her cold gaze sweeping over the old woman with harsh judgment. Patricia curled her lips in a sneer and replied with contempt, "Maybe the hotel made a mistake? Letting a black old lady in here like this is really embarrassing." Catherine didn't respond right away, her gaze still fixated on the old woman, her evaluation clearly distasteful as she looked her up and down. In her mind, someone who looked like that could never afford to attend an event where each meal cost thousands of dollars, let alone fit in with the refined environment of the elite. The malicious whispers began to spread. Some guests turned their heads, offering fake smiles to hide their racist attitudes behind pitying glances. Others didn't hesitate to express their disdain through sneers and condescending stares. Gladys Sullivan seemed to feel the uncomfortable stares but showed no sign of discomfort. Her eyes shone with kindness and determination as she slowly made her way into the ballroom. She walked steadily, unbothered by the murmurs or the mocking looks surrounding her. Catherine took a deep breath, casting a cold glance at the nearby staff member. In a tone that was deliberately loud enough for those around her to hear, she said, "Perhaps we should double-check the guest list. I think there's been a serious mistake here." Catherine's voice rang out like a judgment of authority, immediately drawing the attention of nearby guests. Curious and displeased gazes turned once more toward the elderly black woman, creating a palpable sense of discomfort in the air. But amid the prying eyes and sharp whispers full of racial prejudice, Gladys Sullivan stood still, kind but unyielding. A gentle smile briefly flickered across her wrinkled, kind face, as if she had long been accustomed to such attitudes and was prepared to meet them with rare patience. And in that moment, though no one knew, an unexpected truth was about to be revealed. A secret capable of completely upending their small, glittering, and prejudiced world. As Mrs. Gladys Sullivan slowly walked deeper into the ballroom, the soft sound of her footsteps seemed to amplify the tense atmosphere enveloping the crowd. Catherine Winters couldn't take her eyes off the unfamiliar woman, her gaze cold and filled with obvious distaste and sarcasm. She tilted her head, deliberately bringing her champagne glass to her lips, while Patricia Reynolds and Eleanor Madison stood beside her, constantly throwing disparaging looks toward the elderly woman. Patricia, with her usual haughty demeanor, subtly lifted her chin in disdain. She glanced at her close friends and spoke clearly enough for a few nearby to hear. "Who invited this old black woman here? I just don't understand what the organizers were thinking." Eleanor smiled thinly, a smile full of contempt, and chimed in with a mocking tone. "Why ask, Patricia? She's probably a housekeeper or janitor who got confused. Maybe she forgot the staff entrance." Their cruel words immediately made a few people nearby laugh in agreement, as if such racist remarks were an obvious form of entertainment in their lavish world. They didn't need to hide their prejudices, nor did they care that someone might be hurt by their malicious words. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice slow but sharp, dripping with mockery and disdain. "No wonder this ballroom smells so strange today. I thought this hotel had higher service standards." Patricia immediately covered her mouth to stifle a giggle, her eyes flicking toward Mrs. Gladys with a mocking look, then added, as if to further belittle the elderly woman, "You're right, Catherine. It seems like the guest list for this event has really gone downhill. What a shame. This used to be such a prestigious affair." The sound of cold laughter rose from the group around Catherine, their curious eyes turning to pleasure as they watched the most powerful women in the room mock the unfamiliar black woman who had just entered. Gladys, standing not far off, had clearly heard every word of their heavy-handed discrimination, yet her wrinkled face showed an unusual calm. Her eyes sparkled serenely, as if she had long been accustomed to such prejudiced treatment. Still, the cruel words echoed in the air, leaving invisible scars on her dignity. In another corner of the room, a few other guests began to take notice of what was happening. They discreetly cast scrutinizing glances at Catherine, Patricia, and Eleanor, while a few people clearly looked displeased, frowning in silent disapproval. However, no one had the courage to step forward to stop the powerful women. The unspoken silence of agreement only made their racist remarks sharper and colder. Catherine seemed to grow more confident in her mocking attitude, turning toward Patricia and Eleanor, unabashedly continuing with even more cruel remarks. An old, poor black woman like her. Do you think anyone would have the kindness to donate to this event today? Or is she here to beg for money from us? Patricia immediately responded, raising her champagne glass and lifting her chin with arrogance. Maybe she was invited to help everyone feel their charity is truly noble. What a brilliant strategic choice by the organizers. A chorus of condescending, mocking laughter rose from Catherine's group, growing louder as if they were competing to see who could be the sharpest and cruelest. In this glittering world, racism seemed to be an invisible power, one that people like Catherine used to assert their social status. Mrs. Gladys remained standing there, calm and composed. Each cruel word was like a cold wind blowing through her soul, but it couldn't shake her. Yet, her gaze deepened, reflecting an inner strength that people like Catherine would never understand. However, in a corner of the room, Dr. James Harris, head of pediatrics at the hospital, a respected middle-aged man known for his compassion in the community, had also noticed Gladys's presence. His gaze lingered for a moment as he witnessed the distasteful scene unfolding. His brows furrowed slightly, showing clear discomfort and dissatisfaction with the public discrimination coming from Catherine's group. James Harris had dedicated his life to caring for and protecting children, regardless of their background, whether rich or poor, white or black. Catherine's words were like a knife to his conscience and belief in humanity. For a brief moment he considered stepping forward to intervene, but he hesitated when he saw Gladys's extraordinary composure and gentle smile. He stopped, deciding to wait, sensing that Mrs. Gladys Sullivan was not just an elderly, poor black woman as others might think. And perhaps his intuition was right, for despite all the mockery and scorn, Gladys stood there with a serene and inexplicable demeanor, as if she was holding a great secret, something that could make this entire vain crowd fall silent in deep shame when the truth was revealed. As Catherine's mocking laughter echoed coldly and viciously, Gladys Sullivan gently took a few more steps into the center of the ballroom. Her calm and composed demeanor seemed to challenge the narrow-minded, domineering gazes fixed upon her. There was something powerful and inexplicable about this small, elderly black woman, as if she were untouched by the venomous, racist words swirling around her. Catherine Winters, seemingly provoked by the unusual calmness, decided she could not let it go. She lowered her champagne glass, gently adjusted the hem of her custom-made elegant gown, and boldly walked toward Gladys with a provocative air. The crowd immediately took notice, their eyes following Catherine's every confident and powerful step. With a cold, slightly arrogant expression, Catherine stopped right in front of Gladys. She deliberately looked her up and down, her gaze lingering on the old woman's worn dress and faded shoes. Then she raised her voice just loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "Are you the janitor? We need more water at that table over there." The words that left Catherine's lips were sharp and clear, like a knife, dripping with deep disdain. Nearby, guests chuckled softly, eagerly awaiting the reaction from the frail, black elderly woman standing before the city's most powerful girl. Gladys looked up, her warm, deep brown eyes meeting Catherine's cold, challenging stare. In that moment, everyone waited to see if she would falter or panic at such an overt display of contempt. But contrary to their expectations, the old woman didn't seem flustered or embarrassed. A soft, gentle smile appeared on her kind, aged face. "I'm sorry, miss. Gladys replied in a soft, measured voice, clear yet full of dignity. "I'm not a servant. I'm a guest, just like you." Her gentle but firm words rang out in the silent room, causing a few of the malicious laughs to abruptly die down. Catherine, seemingly taken aback by the response, flinched slightly. Her proud, powerful face briefly showed a hint of confusion, though she quickly regained her usual cold demeanor. But her wounded pride could not go unaddressed. Trying to mask her initial discomfort with a light but venomous laugh, she turned to look at Patricia and Eleanor as if seeking their support, then turned back to face Gladys with a more icy expression than before. "Oh, really? A guest? That's hard to believe. How much have you donated to this event, then?" Gladys remained calm, her expression still warm and composed. She gazed gently at Catherine, speaking slowly and deliberately. "I believe charity shouldn't be measured just by money or jewelry. Sometimes the real value lies in what we do for others rather than what we wear." Her words, though soft, rang out clearly in the increasingly uncomfortable silence. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath, all eyes on Catherine, waiting for her response to the elderly woman's profound statement. Catherine stood frozen for a few seconds, her eyes flashing with deep annoyance, but she quickly regained her usual poise, curling her lips into a cold smile. "That sounds lovely, Mrs. Sullivan. But this is a charity event, and we need people who can actually contribute, not flowery, empty words from a poor, lost old black woman." Her harsh words caused a few nearby guests to chuckle awkwardly, while others looked visibly uncomfortable at the overt and blatant discrimination. But Gladys did not flinch or waver. She gazed at Catherine with eyes full of sympathy and deep regret for the young, wealthy woman standing before her, so powerful, yet so narrow-minded. "I understand what you're saying, Miss Winters, and I also understand why you think a woman like me doesn't belong here. But sometimes the most important things are not what we see right in front of us." Catherine paused for a moment at Gladys's serene response, but she refused to show any further sign of hesitation. She turned her back coldly, her voice ringing with pride. "How interesting. But I think you've chosen the wrong place to preach your morals. Maybe you should find somewhere more suitable to display your nobility." Catherine turned away, waving a dismissive hand to Patricia and Eleanor, signaling for them to leave, as though she didn't want to waste any more time with this strange old woman. But just before she completely vanished from sight, she couldn't resist casting one last glance back at Gladys, her eyes filled with coldness and disdain, as if reaffirming her position. Gladys stood there, silent and composed, her gaze following the proud and opulent figure as it slowly receded. She knew that her calm and dignified attitude had not only made Catherine uncomfortable, but also planted a seed of reflection in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Something deeper than the cold, contemptuous looks they had given her, and she knew that the most important moment of the evening was yet to come. As Catherine turned to walk away, confident that she had firmly established her position in front of the strange woman, she failed to notice that another important figure was approaching Mrs. Gladys Sullivan with a completely different attitude. It was Dr. James Harris, the middle-aged, renowned head of pediatrics at the hospital, a man who was highly respected in the medical community, not only for his expertise but also for his rare, compassionate heart. Just as Catherine and her friends were about to join another group and continue their lively conversation, Dr. Harris's gaze unexpectedly landed on Mrs. Gladys's kind, simple face. He was slightly taken aback, his brows furrowing, but it wasn't a look of discomfort. Instead, it was a mixture of surprise and a deep respect rarely seen from someone of his standing. Catherine, standing not far away, happened to witness this brief moment. She paused, feeling a sudden sense of unease, as she saw the usually composed and cautious Dr. Harris hastening toward Mrs. Gladys with an overly polite demeanor. A strange, uncomfortable feeling stirred within her, but she tried to convince herself that it didn't mean anything significant. When Dr. Harris reached Mrs. Gladys, he stopped and gave a polite, respectful bow, a level of courtesy that no one in the room had ever seen him display before. His voice was warm, sincere. "It is an honor to meet you here, Mrs. Sullivan. I had no idea you would be attending. Otherwise, I would have personally welcomed you at the door." Gladys responded with a familiar, gentle smile, her wrinkled hand reaching out to shake the man's hand with deep respect. "You've always been thoughtful and kind, Dr. Harris. I just wanted to attend quietly, without disturbing anyone." Catherine's gaze darkened instinctively, growing sharper than usual as she witnessed this strange scene. She turned to Patricia and Eleanor, her face showing clear signs of suspicion and frustration. "Do you see that? Why is Dr. Harris acting so strangely toward that old woman? He must have mistaken her for someone important." Patricia frowned in agreement, her beautiful but cold face revealing her displeasure. "Or maybe the hospital is trying to appear progressive on race. Hospitals love doing this kind of thing to win public favor these days." Catherine immediately laughed dismissively, her eyes still fixed on Mrs. Gladys and Dr. Harris, who were chatting intimately across the room. "Exactly, Patricia. Maybe they chose her to look diverse and civilized. An old, poor black woman would be the perfect image for that goal." Mocking laughter echoed from Catherine's group of friends once again, but this time it was less comfortable than before. A sense of doubt and frustration quietly crept into their minds. The confidence that had always radiated from Catherine's words, full of power, began to waver in the face of Dr. Harris's unusual respectful attitude. On the other side of the room, James Harris seemed completely uninterested in the prying eyes and malicious comments surrounding him. He looked at Gladys with a gaze filled with sincere and deep gratitude, speaking to her with a respect that could not be mistaken. "You have no idea how much your presence means to us. I'm sure the children at the hospital will be overjoyed to know you've taken the time to join us tonight." Gladys quietly nodded, her eyes briefly filled with emotion. "I just want to do what's right, Doctor. Those children deserve the best from us, don't they?" Dr. Harris's gaze immediately softened, looking at Mrs. Gladys with admiration and reverence. "Yes, Mrs. Sullivan. And it is because of people like you that true hope exists." Their words were quiet but full of meaning, and though no one was certain what they were talking about, the special gestures of respect that Dr. Harris showed Mrs. Gladys began to catch the attention of others in the room, who started looking at her with less derision and more curiosity and speculation. Further away, Catherine still hadn't taken her eyes off the scene. A sense of indescribable frustration swelled within her, an unease she couldn't explain. She had never seen Dr. Harris treat anyone this specially, let alone a complete stranger, especially one as old and poor as Gladys Sullivan. The confident, cutting remarks she had made earlier suddenly seemed hollow and less certain than ever. In Catherine's mind, disordered thoughts began to form into questions filled with frustration and doubt. Who is that old black woman? Could she have been too quick to judge others based on appearances? No, Catherine immediately rejected that thought. She couldn't let an old, unknown woman shake her absolute belief in material wealth and power. But no matter how hard she tried to dismiss it, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that behind the simple, frail exterior of Mrs. Gladys Sullivan, there was a secret so significant it could topple the entire perfect world that Catherine had so carefully built. And as she continued to think, Dr. Harris politely extended his hand, inviting Gladys to the main stage, where the hospital director was about to announce the special sponsors of the evening. Catherine shuddered at the rising sense of unease within her. A great secret was about to be revealed, and she knew. It was something she absolutely didn't want to hear. As Catherine tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping into her mind, the stage light suddenly flashed brightly, immediately drawing the attention of the entire room. The soft background music faded, and the hospital director, Mr. Richard Thornton, stepped onto the podium with his usual elegant and confident smile. His warm, deep voice echoed clearly, powerfully yet tinged with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, first, I would like to sincerely thank you all for taking the time to attend tonight's charity gala. As we all know, this event holds a very special meaning. It is not merely a celebration, but an opportunity for us to come together and help children who are fighting illnesses every single day. He paused for a moment, his eyes sweeping across the crowd as if to affirm the sincerity in his next words. And now, I would like to announce some exciting news that I am deeply moved to share with you all. Our hospital has just received an extraordinary and generous donation from an anonymous benefactor. This is the largest donation in the history of our hospital, amounting to $25 million, dedicated specifically to our new pediatric department. As the announcement echoed through the room, the hall was immediately filled with astonished murmurs and curious, excited glances. Catherine momentarily froze, her breath catching for a few seconds as the figure of $25 million rang clearly in her mind. Such an enormous sum was enough to completely change anyone's social standing. But who could be capable of such generosity and yet choose to remain anonymous? While Catherine was still lost in her thoughts, Mr. Thornton smiled warmly and continued with emotion in his voice. Our benefactor initially wished to remain anonymous, but after careful consideration, this person has agreed to appear here today for a very special reason. They believe their presence can convey an important message about kindness and equality to all of us. Catherine instinctively furrowed her brow, her hand gripping her champagne glass a little tighter. Her intuition made her uneasy, and a strange, foreboding feeling began to stir inside her. She couldn't quite believe the thought that was forming in her mind, but the more she tried to dismiss it, the stronger the feeling became. And now, Mr. Thornton's voice rose again, full of emotion. Please allow me to invite to the stage our very special benefactor, a woman of great respect who has deeply moved and humbled us, Mrs. Gladys Sullivan. The moment the name Gladys Sullivan was spoken, the entire hall fell into a stunned silence, a silence so profound that one could hear their own heartbeats in the shock. Catherine stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, unable to hide her astonishment. Both Patricia and Eleanor also paled, unable to utter a word. From the edge of the stage, Gladys walked up to the podium with an air of calm, poise, and an almost startling humility. In the eyes of the audience, she was no longer the poor, elderly black woman they had cruelly mocked earlier. She was now an enigmatic, powerful figure, revealing her true identity as a wealthy and generous benefactor, leaving everyone stunned. The soft tap of Gladys's shoes echoed slowly with each step, each stride striking directly at the arrogance, prejudice, and misconceptions that Catherine and the elite crowd had built up throughout the evening. The looks from everyone around her had completely shifted, from disdain to awe, from mockery to admiration, and from arrogance to deep confusion. On stage, Mr. Thornton bowed respectfully to Gladys, extending his hand with politeness to invite her to the honored position. As she stepped up to the microphone, her voice was gentle, simple, yet full of strength and confidence, compelling the audience to hang on her every word. I know my presence here tonight may come as a surprise to many. Gladys began calmly, her eyes briefly meeting Catherine's with meaningful intent. But sometimes we must accept that a person's true worth is not defined by their skin color, appearance, or the clothes they wear, but by their heart, actions, and sincerity. She paused for a few seconds, allowing her profound words to settle deeply into the minds of the audience. No one dared to speak, not even to breathe too loudly. The mocking whispers that had begun earlier had completely evaporated, replaced by deep shame and regret. Gladys continued softly, I chose to appear here today not to seek recognition or fame, but simply to share one truth, that kindness and goodness should not be judged by the shallow standards we often use to evaluate one another. Her gaze lingered once more on Catherine, not with reproach, but with a look of sympathy, strong enough to make the powerful young woman shiver slightly with shame. Gladys smiled gently, concluding her speech with a powerful message. I hope that from tonight we will all learn to look at the true value of each person and work together to create a better and fairer world for everyone, especially for the innocent children who need our sincere help the most. The entire hall erupted into a thunderous applause, but Catherine remained frozen, feeling as if the world of power she had built was slowly cracking and crumbling right before her eyes. Amidst the thunderous applause filling the ballroom for Mrs. Gladys Sullivan, Catherine stood frozen. A feeling of shock mixed with an unprecedented panic surged within her, so powerful that her hand involuntarily loosened, causing the expensive champagne glass to fall onto the gleaming marble floor, shattering into countless tiny pieces. The sound of shattering glass echoed sharply in the unusually still air, drawing all eyes immediately to Catherine. Her face turned pale, completely devoid of the usual arrogance, replaced by a clear look of bewilderment and fear. Beside her, Patricia and Eleanor were no better, their faces now ashen, their eyes wide with confusion and terror. Patricia stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of her shock. It can't be her. It can't be that poor old black woman. Eleanor covered her mouth with her hand, her breath quickening, her eyes scanning Catherine for some reassurance or denial. But Catherine, too, had completely lost her ability to compose herself, her confusion and chaos evident in the wide eyes of a girl who once prided herself on never being rattled by anything. The distinguished guests in the room quickly recognized the unusual scene. Curiosity mixed with subtle disapproval began to focus on the powerful women who had once been considered the epitome of Boston's high society. They couldn't help but recall the cruel mockery Catherine and her friends had directed at Mrs. Gladys just moments before. Now, in their eyes, the sharp taunts of that moment appeared as a clear indictment, exposing Catherine and her friends' shallowness, selfishness, and ruthless prejudice. Whispers filled the air, spreading quickly, causing Catherine to feel suffocated with shame. A middle-aged woman standing nearby whispered to her husband in a tone loud enough to be heard, "I can't believe it. People who always seem so elegant and moral could behave so horribly. It's shameful." The man beside her nodded in agreement, casting a reproachful glance at Catherine. We've always known that wealth doesn't always mean good character, but this time it's crystal clear. Those bitter remarks echoed in Catherine's mind like a bell tolling the complete collapse of the status she had always prided herself on. For the first time in her life, the powerful girl felt a profound sense of fear and shame, so overwhelming she could hardly bear it, a feeling she never imagined would befall her. Catherine turned to Patricia and Eleanor, searching for some comfort, but only saw the same confusion and panic reflected on their faces. Patricia trembled as she whispered, her voice so low it was nearly inaudible. "Catherine, what are we going to do now? Everyone is looking at us." Catherine tried to regain her composure, took a deep breath, but her heart still pounded as if it might leap out of her chest. She looked at Patricia and Eleanor, trying to speak with a steady tone, but her voice betrayed her. "Stay calm. We haven't done anything wrong. How could we know she would be like this?" But even as she uttered those excuses, Catherine knew deep down that she could not deceive herself. She clearly remembered every cruel word, every scornful glance she had directed toward Mrs. Gladys Sullivan. And now those words and looks returned like sharp knives, cutting deep into the self-respect and honor she had spent a lifetime building. A little further away, another group of aristocratic women turned their gaze toward Catherine, their faces full of reproach and disappointment. One of them, the most reserved and polite woman in high society, shook her head slightly and said to her friend, "I thought Catherine was more thoughtful than this. Who would have guessed she could behave so lowly?" The murmurs felt like the final blows to Catherine's pride. The girl who had once believed the world was at her feet now stood trembling beneath the cold and disappointed gazes of everyone around her. As Catherine stood there, still dazed and trying to find a way out of this embarrassing situation, Mrs. Gladys's gaze from the stage fell upon her. No words of reproach, no hint of anger, only a kind, compassionate look that made Catherine feel even more ashamed than she ever thought possible. It was in that moment that Catherine realized she had made a grave mistake, not because Mrs. Gladys was a mysterious, wealthy woman, but because Mrs. Gladys, whether rich or poor, deserved the respect that Catherine had deliberately denied her due to prejudice and misguided pride. Standing frozen in the midst of shame and panic, Catherine felt more helpless and small than ever before in her life. Everything she had believed in, all the material values she used to judge others, now crumbled away like dust in a single moment. In the absolute silence that enveloped the group of proud women, the only thing that echoed in Catherine's mind was Mrs. Gladys's calm yet powerful words from earlier, a stern reminder of a truth Catherine had never allowed herself to face. The true value of a person lies not in their skin color or appearance, but in their heart, actions, and sincerity. It was in that moment that Catherine knew her life would never be the same again from this point forward. In the suffocating silence that enveloped the entire hall, Gladys Sullivan stood on stage, her gentle gaze slowly scanning each face with warmth and compassion. Amidst the hundreds of eyes fixed upon her, her eyes lingered a little longer on Catherine and her group of friends, who now lowered their heads to avoid that gentle yet powerful gaze. Gladys smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with deep and sincere emotion. Then her warm voice slowly filled the absolute silence of the room. "I understand that my presence here today may have come as a surprise to many of you. But to help you understand why I am standing here, I would like to share a small story. My story. About my past, about this very hospital, and about the things I have endured." The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next words. Catherine, too, looked up, trying to suppress her shame and confusion, wondering what Gladys would say next. A strange feeling, a mixture of curiosity and worry, was rising within her, something she had never felt before. Gladys's voice continued, each word soft but incredibly clear, as if it were touching the deepest corners of the listeners' hearts. "More than 60 years ago, when I was just a poor black girl, only 9 years old, I was diagnosed with a deadly blood cancer. For a child like me, that was a horrible tragedy. But the pain of that tragedy was even greater when every day I had to face the disdain and rejection simply because of the color of my skin." Gladys paused for a moment, a hint of deep sadness in her eyes as she recalled those old memories, memories she could never forget. Back then, this hospital was not a friendly place for patients like me. I still remember the looks from the nurses and doctors. They didn't look at me with compassion or understanding, but with reluctance, discomfort, and even fear. There were times I had to wait for hours to receive treatment, just because I was a poor black child. I often heard their whispers, words full of discrimination, coldness, and cruelty that were enough to make a small child like me cry silently every night. The room was now filled with deep emotion. Many people had begun to wipe away tears that had started to form in the corners of their eyes, feeling ashamed as they realized they had once held similar attitudes and prejudices, whether silently or openly. Gladys gave a soft, sad smile, then gently continued her story, her voice filled with genuine compassion and forgiveness. But even in those darkest days of my life, I was lucky enough to meet one person, a young doctor with a warm and kind heart. He was the only white doctor at the hospital who never turned his back on me, who never allowed my skin color or my poverty to define my worth. He cared for me, encouraged me, treated me like a real person, not just a black patient. She paused, her gaze briefly moving toward Dr. James Harris, and everyone immediately understood the special connection between them. The head pediatrician, who had just respectfully greeted Gladys earlier, was the descendant of the young doctor who had saved her life and changed it forever. Gladys continued, her voice trembling slightly from the deeper emotions. Thanks to the kindness and dedication of that young doctor, I survived the deadly illness. But more importantly, what he gave me was not just life, but the belief that the value of a person is not determined by the color of their skin, their wealth, or their social status, but by how we treat others. Her words left the entire room in silence, filled with shame and deep emotion. Many exchanged glances, their eyes now filled with regret and self-reflection. As for Catherine, she could no longer hold back the tears streaming down her face. In her heart, a terrible guilt was rising, for the very woman whose painful story she had just heard was the one she had just harshly insulted with the sharpest and most cruel words. On stage, Gladys gently closed her touching story with a sincere and humane message. I stand here today, donating $25 million to the hospital, not to boast about wealth, but because I want to ensure that no child will ever have to endure what I went through. I hope that from this day forward, this hospital will not only be a place for physical healing, but a place where every child, regardless of skin color or background, is treated with love and fairness. As Gladys's final words echoed, the room immediately erupted in heartfelt applause. Everyone stood, offering her deep respect and admiration, with many even shedding tears in response to such a real and moving story. For Catherine, in that moment, she felt completely shattered by the truth that had been revealed. All the pride, prejudice, and harsh words from earlier came back like a bitter judgment. She looked up at the stage, seeing clearly her own smallness and shallowness, and understood that Gladys Sullivan, the very person she had once despised, was now the one from whom she needed to learn the most. And in that moment, Catherine knew one thing for certain, that her life from now on could never continue as it had before, and she would have to find a way to face the consequences of the mistakes she had made. As the applause for Mrs. Gladys Sullivan died down, Catherine felt an immense pressure weighing heavily on her shoulders. All eyes were on her, seemingly waiting to see how she would react now that the truth had been revealed in such an emotional way. A sense of confusion and panic overwhelmed her, causing her heart to race in fear. She quickly turned to Patricia and Eleanor, whispering urgently, filled with desperation, "We need to do something right now. We can't let everyone see us as terrible racists." Patricia nodded slightly, her eyes still full of bewilderment. "You're right, Catherine. Maybe we should go talk to her, apologize or something." Eleanor, who prided herself on her quick thinking in awkward situations, quickly added, "Yes, we'll say it was all a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to offend her. That might help salvage the situation." Although Catherine's pride still strongly resisted the idea of lowering herself to apologize to someone she had just looked down on moments ago, her instinct to protect herself overshadowed everything. She nodded in agreement, signaling to her friends to follow her toward Mrs. Gladys. The three women who had confidently mocked Gladys earlier now rushed toward the stage where Mrs. Gladys had just stepped down to respectful applause and greetings from the surrounding guests. The crowd watched them with curiosity mixed with skepticism, as if everyone understood that this approach came from anything but sincerity. As they neared Mrs. Gladys, Catherine forced a smile she hoped would appear friendly, but the tension in her eyes was evident. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke before Mrs. Gladys, deliberately loud enough for the people around to hear. "Mrs. Sullivan, we are truly surprised and moved by the story you've just shared. I think there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding between us." Gladys looked at Catherine with calm yet incredibly sharp eyes. She silently observed the young woman trying to hide her confusion and panic beneath the veneer of artificial politeness. She did not rush to respond, seemingly wanting to give Catherine a little more time to understand herself. The atmosphere around them became so tense that Catherine felt as though she could not breathe. She glanced quickly at Patricia and Eleanor, seeking some support, but all she received were equally panicked looks. Finally, Catherine continued with an even more trembling voice. "Honestly, we didn't mean to offend you. Perhaps we rushed to judgment without really knowing who you are." Gladys gently shook her head, her eyes soft yet firm. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone around to hear. "Miss Winters, what saddens me is not that you didn't know who I am, but the way you treated a stranger solely based on skin color and appearance. If I weren't standing here today as a wealthy philanthropist, would you truly want to apologize and show respect to me?" Gladys' heartfelt and incisive question made Catherine freeze for a few seconds. Her face flushed with embarrassment from the depth of the inquiry. Patricia and Eleanor could not hide their own discomfort, their eyes immediately dropping to the floor, avoiding the reproachful gazes pouring in from every direction. Gladys remained still, her voice continuing, gentle yet resolute. "Respect and kindness cannot come from benefits or embarrassment in front of a crowd, but from the heart. I do not blame you for misunderstanding me, but I am deeply saddened to realize that the only thing that has changed your attitude is my true identity, not because you recognize the mistake in how you judged and treated others." Gladys's straightforward words felt like sharp needles piercing Catherine's heart. She stood there, completely unable to defend herself against the truth Gladys had just laid bare so publicly and clearly. The surrounding guests focused their attention on her, their eyes filled with judgment and unmistakable disappointment. With calm yet firm finality, Gladys concluded the conversation with a message that resonated deeply. "I hope you learned something from this event, not for my sake, but for your own. We can only become better people when we look back and sincerely acknowledge the mistakes we have made, without pretense or falseness." With that, Mrs. Gladys gently turned and walked away, leaving Catherine and her friends frozen in a deep sense of shame and embarrassment. Her sincere and composed words echoed in their minds, making Catherine realize that everything she had just tried to do had only highlighted the falseness and weakness within her. And in the cold, reproachful gazes of everyone around her, Catherine, for the first time, understood the most important lesson of her life, that she could no longer continue living with such shallow and dishonest values. She needed to change, but how? She wasn't sure yet. In the heavy silence, as Catherine and her friends stood frozen with embarrassment, all eyes in the hall once again turned to Gladys Sullivan. She had just quietly stepped away from the pretentious conversation and made her way toward the stage, where the hospital director, Mr. Richard Thornton, was waiting for her with deep respect and admiration. Mr. Thornton stepped forward, bowing politely with a gentle smile, and spoke softly to Gladys. "Mrs. Sullivan, we would like to dedicate a special recognition to you as a token of our immense gratitude for your incredible generosity and compassion towards our hospital. The hospital's honor roll plaque is ready to have your name inscribed as the sincerest thank you from all of us." The hall fell silent in anticipation, as everyone seemed to be certain that Gladys would graciously accept this special honor. But in response to his heartfelt words, Gladys gently shook her head in a calm, surprising manner. She spoke softly, but with unwavering determination, causing everyone in the hall to be stunned. "I am very grateful for the sincerity and kindness of Mr. Thornton and the hospital. However, I have a special request, and I hope you will understand my decision." The atmosphere in the hall immediately became more curious and tense. Catherine, standing at a distance, couldn't help but look up with clear surprise, her eyes fixed on Gladys, wondering what would lead her to reject such a rare honor. Gladys continued, her voice gentle yet full of meaning. "I would prefer that instead of inscribing my name on the plaque, the hospital replace it with a message dedicated to the children. I want everyone to remember that the ones who truly deserve to be honored here are not people like me who donate money, but the children, those patients who fight every day against illness with incredible resilience and courage." The hall erupted with whispers of deep emotion, and many eyes began to well up with tears at the humility and nobility of the simple woman standing before them. Mr. Thornton hesitated for a moment, moved by emotion, and his voice faltered slightly as he asked for clarification. "Mrs. Sullivan, do you mean you wish to remain completely anonymous?" Gladys smiled gently, her eyes warm and sincere as she clearly responded. "Yes, Mr. Thornton. I truly wish for this contribution to be detached from my name or personal fame. Instead, I hope it will serve as a genuine reminder of the strength of resilience, the willpower, and the extraordinary determination of the children at this hospital. That is the most important message I wish to convey." Immediately, the hall erupted in prolonged applause, filled with emotion. People standing nearby began whispering in awe, expressing greater respect for Gladys than even when they learned about her massive donation. Her humble and meaningful action only highlighted further the exceptional character of Gladys Sullivan, a woman who never let personal fame obscure the profound human values she embodied. From a distance, Catherine stood still, her heart filled with an unprecedented feeling of remorse. Watching Gladys's noble and humble act, the proud young woman now understood more clearly than ever the shallowness and insignificance of her own beliefs. Throughout her life, Catherine had always believed that a person's value was based on their position, reputation, and what money could buy. But Gladys, with a simple and sincere gesture, quietly shattered that misguided belief of hers. Catherine's heart raced, and tears threatened to spill from her eyes. For the first time, she seriously questioned herself. Had she ever truly understood the real value of a person? Did the things she had always believed and pursued still matter when faced with the sincere kindness and noble humility that Gladys had just shown? Around Catherine, many people began to turn toward her, their gazes filled with a mixture of scrutiny and subtle reproach. It seemed everyone clearly remembered the harsh and discriminatory words she had previously directed at Gladys. Now, Gladys's selfless and forgiving actions made them all more aware of the selfishness and pretense in Catherine and her friends' attitudes. Catherine felt as though she were being completely exposed before the crowd, the shame and humiliation engulfing her like a tidal wave. In that moment, Gladys's gaze happened to fall on her again. But, unlike the reproachful glances around her, Gladys's look only contained compassion and sincere forgiveness, leaving Catherine even more confused and embarrassed. Fully aware of her mistakes, Catherine realized that Gladys Sullivan had not only made a massive material contribution to the hospital, but more importantly, she had given everyone, especially Catherine, a profound lesson in kindness, humility, and living with a sincere heart. At that moment, Catherine knew she could no longer continue living by her outdated and flawed values. From this point forward, her life would certainly have to change, but to truly change, she would need the courage to face herself, admit her mistakes, and most importantly, learn how to live more sincerely and kindly, just like the simple and noble woman she had witnessed today. As the charity gala night came to a close, the extravagant lights of the Hawthorne Hotel gradually dimmed, returning silence to the city of Boston. But for Catherine, tonight could never be peaceful. She returned home exhausted, her mind filled with words, glances, and a deep sense of shame about her recent actions. She had never felt so heavy-hearted, each step feeling as though it carried 1,000 pounds. The luxurious bedroom, usually a place of peace and pride every night, now felt unfamiliar and terrifying. Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes vacant as she stared out into the pitch-black night through the window. The images of the evening flooded her mind. Those cruel, racially charged words, the public mockery she had directed at Gladys Sullivan, and the disappointed and reproachful looks from everyone in the ballroom. For the first time in her life, Catherine fully realized just how wrong she had been. She held her head in her hands, trying to push away the venomous words she had spoken, but the more she tried, the clearer they became, like sharp knives digging deep into her heart. She could remember each phrase, every word she had said, every mocking and arrogant look she had thrown at Gladys, the humble woman who had proven that true kindness and the real worth of a person were never about appearances or race. Catherine felt as though she had been stripped bare before this undeniable truth. The feelings of shame and regret kept her awake well past midnight, unable to find any rest. The next morning, as the first light of dawn gently filtered through the window, Catherine made a decision she never thought she could make before: to go meet Gladys in person. She understood that this was her only chance to face her mistakes in the most sincere and profound way possible. Arriving at Gladys's simple home, Catherine felt nervous and afraid. She had stood before thousands of people, speaking confidently and powerfully, but now, standing before this modest door, she trembled like a child afraid to confront her own wrongdoing. The door opened, and Gladys appeared, her face still kind and gentle as it had been the day before. Her eyes met Catherine's without a hint of reproach, only full of forgiveness and patient anticipation. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Sullivan," Catherine said, her voice trembling, so soft it was almost inaudible. "But I really need to talk to you. I want to offer my deepest apologies from the bottom of my heart." Gladys quietly smiled, her gaze more gentle than ever. She softly spoke to Catherine. "I'm always ready to listen to you, Catherine. Come inside, we can talk." As the two women sat across from each other at a small wooden table in the simple living room, Catherine felt as though all the layers of pretense and arrogance she had carried with her had completely melted away. For the first time in her life, she revealed her vulnerability and hurt to a stranger. "I didn't sleep at all last night, Mrs. Sullivan," Catherine began, her voice choking in her throat. I kept thinking about what I said to you, about the way I treated you just because of your appearance and the color of your skin. I truly can't forgive myself." Gladys listened quietly, her eyes full of empathy and patience. She didn't interrupt, allowing the young woman to express herself fully. Catherine continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "I never thought of myself as a bad person, but now, looking back at what I've done, I see just how cruel I was. I don't know why I acted that way. I can't understand why such terrible things like racism and prejudice have become so ingrained in my thoughts." Tears began to fall uncontrollably from Catherine's eyes, and for the first time she cried in front of someone else. The pain, shame, and self-blame were suffocating her heart, but in that moment she felt lighter than ever before. At last, she was able to confront the truth and admit her mistakes in the most sincere way possible. Gladys gently placed her warm, weathered hand over Catherine's trembling one, her gaze full of forgiveness and understanding. "Catherine, the most important thing is that you've recognized your mistake. No one is born perfect. What matters is that we can look back and change. I believe that at this moment you've truly grown so much." Gladys's gentle and sincere words made Catherine cry even harder. She grasped Gladys's hand tightly, feeling as if, for the first time in her life, she had found a deep and genuine understanding, something she had never known before. Gladys continued in a soft but powerful voice, "The past will always be the past, Catherine. But the future is in your hands. Use this experience to become a better person, to do good for others. That is the best way to redeem our greatest mistakes." Catherine nodded, her eyes filled with tears but full of determination. "I will do that, Mrs. Sullivan. I promise you, I will never make this mistake again. I will do everything I can to be a better person, not just for myself, but for you and for those I've hurt." As Catherine left Gladys's small, simple home, she felt as though a part of her soul had been healed. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in her life, she saw the right path she had to walk, never to lose herself again. Leaving Gladys's small home, Catherine felt an unusual sense of relief, though her heart was still heavy with regret and sorrow for her past mistakes. But in that moment, she understood that her sincere apology would mean nothing unless accompanied by real, concrete actions. She knew better than anyone that in order to truly atone for her wrongs, she needed to do more than just express regret. With strong resolve, Catherine quickly decided to give up entirely on the extravagant parties and frivolous social gatherings that had once been an integral part of her wealthy, powerful life. She realized that it was these flashy things that had blinded her, making her blind to the real, important values of life. Instead, Catherine began to spend most of her time at the children's hospital, where Gladys had suffered so much in the past. At first, Catherine's presence at the hospital surprised and even raised suspicions among the nurses and patients. They still remembered what she had done, and it wasn't easy for them to accept this sudden change in the woman once known for her arrogance and indifference. However, Catherine was undeterred. She began with the smallest tasks, like helping the nurses prepare treatment rooms and taking care of the children fighting illness. Every day, she showed up early at the hospital, dressed simply, completely abandoning the expensive jewelry and glamorous appearance she once took pride in. What she needed now was sincerity, patience, and above all, time for others to slowly accept her newfound self. After a short period, Catherine began to understand more deeply the inequalities faced by the black children in the hospital. She realized that the stories Gladys had told her about the past were not just gone with time. There were still deep-seated prejudices, unfriendly glances, and invisible barriers that made it difficult for many poor and black patients to access the best medical services. This realization pained and angered Catherine, but unlike before, this time she didn't just stand back and judge. She made a decisive and powerful choice to act. She used her connections, resources, and finances to push forward programs supporting black children, ensuring they had equal access to the best care available. But this journey of change was not easy. Soon, Catherine's old circle of friends began to show their displeasure and distance themselves when they realized she no longer shared their views. The phone calls became fewer, and the invitations to parties stopped coming. Some of her close friends, who had once stood by her side in every celebration, now spoke harshly, accusing Catherine of trying to appear noble and hypocritical, or even losing herself by helping those she had once looked down on. One day, when Catherine happened to run into Patricia at the hospital, Patricia did not hesitate to express her derision with a cold, sarcastic tone. "Catherine, I just can't understand what you're doing. Are you trying to become a saint in everyone's eyes? Or do you think a few actions like this can erase what you've done?" Catherine looked Patricia straight in the eye, her gaze calm yet firm, and gently replied, "I'm not doing this to erase the past, Patricia. The past will always be there, reminding me of who I was. I'm doing this because I want to change, I want to live a more meaningful life, and I want to make sure that no one else has to endure the suffering that Miss Gladys had to go through." Her honest and decisive words left Patricia silent, unable to respond. But Catherine also understood that from that moment on, her relationship with her old friends could never be repaired. This saddened her, but she accepted it as the price she had to pay to become a better person. The more time Catherine spent at the hospital, the more she felt her soul healing little by little. She slowly gained the trust and affection of the nurses, doctors, and the families of the children. Every time she saw the smiles of the black children, the ones who had endured inequality, of which she herself had once been a part, Catherine found herself more motivated to continue on this path of atonement. One afternoon, as Catherine sat beside the bed of a young black girl, helping her drink medicine while telling her cheerful stories, Gladys unexpectedly entered the room. Her eyes sparkled with quiet joy as she softly said, "I've heard many people talking about what you're doing, Catherine. I wanted to come and thank you. Your actions are really changing the lives of so many people here." Catherine looked at Gladys, her eyes filling with tears, this time tears of joy and deep gratitude. "No, Ms. Sullivan, I should be the one thanking you. You are the one who woke me up, gave me the chance to correct the mistakes I made." Gladys gently took Catherine's hand, her voice soft and sincere. "Catherine, we all make mistakes, but what's important is that you've learned to rise from them and courageously move forward. I'm very proud of you." In that moment, Catherine realized that though the road ahead would still be full of challenges, she would never give up. For now, for the first time in her life, she truly understood the path she had to walk. A difficult, lonely path, but one full of meaning. A path leading to true forgiveness. Not only from Gladys, but most importantly from herself. Time passed quickly. 6 months since Catherine began her arduous but meaningful journey of redemption, and 6 months since the last time she felt the most profound loneliness of her life. The prejudices and cold stares from her former friends no longer caused her fear. For, at this point, Catherine had found a new family. The sick children, the doctors and nurses, and especially Gladys Sullivan, who had quietly accompanied her and helped her through the hardest times. Today, in a space bathed in bright golden sunlight, the grand opening of the special garden named Sophie's Butterfly Haven takes place amidst the anticipation and excitement of everyone. This is a special project initiated by Gladys, with Catherine offering her full support. The garden was designed specifically for the hospital's sick children, especially those who suffer from the inequalities in access to health care. Today's gathering was unlike the glamorous galas Catherine had attended in the past. Gone were the elaborate dresses, the dazzling jewelry, and the scrutinizing gazes. Instead, everyone shared in a common, simple joy, full of emotion. The atmosphere of the opening ceremony was warm, happy, and filled with hope, feelings that Catherine had never truly experienced during her years living in the vanity of the past. Among the crowd, Gladys appeared with a gentle smile and eyes full of deep pride. She was carefully pushing the wheelchair of little Sophie, an 8-year-old patient with large, bright eyes. Sophie suffered from a terminal illness, but her gaze was always filled with strength and innocent joy, as though her illness could not take away the vibrant life within her small soul. The room fell silent as Gladys and Sophie slowly made their way into the garden. Colorful flowers bloomed, butterflies fluttered gently in the soft golden sunlight, creating a magical and deeply emotional scene. Gladys gently bent down, pointing toward the butterflies flying around, softly whispering in Sophie's ear, causing the little girl to laugh with delight. Sophie's pure laughter spread waves of love that touched the hearts of everyone present. In another corner of the garden, Catherine was attentively preparing for the other children of color, whom she now considered her own. Gone were the coldness and pride. Catherine now radiated a warmth and sincerity that everyone around her could easily feel. She personally adjusted the little outfits of the children, gently smoothing their curly hair, offering them words of love and encouragement. As the children stood up on the small stage set in the middle of the butterfly garden, Catherine's heart suddenly swelled with emotion. This was the performance that she and the children had practiced for weeks. It was not just a song, it was her message to everyone about change, love, and equality. The piano played a soft, flowing melody, and the young, pure voices of the children echoed through the garden. The simple lyrics, filled with faith, hope, and sincere gratitude, reached deep into the hearts of all the attendees. Catherine stood beside the children, singing with them, tears flowing freely down her face, tears that she no longer tried to hide. These were not tears of shame or self-pity, but tears of joy, gratitude, and above all, profound pride for these children she had once turned away from due to her own narrow prejudices. Gladys watched from a distance, her eyes also filled with tears as she witnessed the touching scene. She looked at Catherine with fondness and pride, silently thanking life for the opportunity to meet and change someone like Catherine. For now, the selfish and cold young woman had become a strong, sincere, and compassionate woman. When the song ended, the garden erupted in enthusiastic applause and the choked sobs of many of the attendees. Catherine hugged each child tightly, her eyes full of love and gratitude. In that moment, Catherine truly felt that she had found the true meaning of life, something she had never realized before, despite having once stood atop the pinnacle of fame and wealth. As the ceremony slowly came to an end, Gladys gently walked over to Catherine, her hand softly squeezing Catherine's, her voice full of emotion as she spoke. Today, I am truly proud of you, Catherine. Not because you've changed, but because you've found your true self, something you never knew before. Catherine smiled through her tears, gently responding, "It's all thanks to you, Mrs. Sullivan. You taught me that we cannot change the past, but the future is always in our hands. And today, I know for sure that my future is here, with these children." The two women looked toward the children playing happily in the butterfly garden. Catherine's heart was truly at peace now, for she knew that from this moment forward, Every step she took would lead her to the best thing she had ever found in her life: sincere forgiveness, compassion, and the true meaning of unconditional love. As the evening light stretches across Sophie's butterfly haven, the soft orange hue of the sunset blends with the vibrant colors of the flowers and the delicate wings of butterflies, creating an extraordinarily beautiful and serene scene. The crowd has slowly dispersed, leaving the garden in a peaceful silence, with only Gladys and Catherine sitting quietly together on a bench beneath the ancient tree. The two women now look toward the flowers that are gradually closing, as though the peaceful moment is enveloping their souls. The events of the day are still vivid in Catherine's mind: the sweet laughter of children, the loving gazes of those around her, and the tears of happiness that she could no longer hold back. Catherine gently turns to Gladys, her gaze no longer carrying the arrogance it once did, but instead filled with sincerity and deep gratitude. She slowly speaks, her words clear and full of emotion. "Mrs. Sullivan, all my life I've been blinded by skin color and wealth. I used to believe that a person's value lay only in their status, riches, and ethnicity. It is you, with your kindness and sincerity, who has awakened me from those illusions. I truly don't know how to thank you enough." Gladys turns to look at Catherine, her eyes as gentle and warm as always. She smiles softly, her eyes sparkling in the soft afternoon light, then responds with a warm but profoundly deep voice. "Catherine, we are all born equal. A person's true worth is not measured by their skin color or the sparkling jewels they wear. The most important thing is always what lies deep within our hearts: the way we treat each other, kindness, sincerity, and the ability to empathize with the suffering of others." Her gentle, yet profound words echo in Catherine's mind. For the first time in her life, she clearly understands what truly matters. Gladys not only helped her see her own mistakes, but also gave her the chance to live a life full of greater meaning. "You know," Catherine continues, her voice trembling with emotion, "I never thought that I would have a day like today. A day when I can honestly sit down, reflect, and admit my mistakes. It was you who showed me that to truly live well, I must first have the courage to face myself." Gladys gently places her hand on Catherine's, her eyes full of understanding and warmth. "That's right, Catherine. We all make mistakes. But what truly matters is not the mistakes themselves, but how we rise up after every fall. You've been very brave in facing your own mistakes and deciding to change. That's something I am truly proud of." Gladys's words soothe Catherine's soul, bringing a sense of peace and tranquility she has never known before. She gently leans back into the chair, gazing up at the sky turning into soft purple hues, and her heart swells with gratitude and boundless happiness. "You know," Catherine continues, her voice now full of resolve and sincerity, "I will spend the rest of my life helping children like Sophie, to ensure that no child ever has to endure injustice because of their skin color or poverty. That is how I will live, and it is the sincerest thank you I wish to send to you." Gladys looks at Catherine, her eyes glowing with deep pride and affection. She smiles gently, nodding in approval, and replies in a warm voice, "I am certain you will do that, Catherine. And when you do, you will realize that the true happiness in life doesn't come from the glittering material things, but from bringing joy and happiness to others." In that moment, Catherine realized that this was the most valuable lesson she had ever learned in her life. Gladys taught her that the true worth of a person can never be measured by money, race, or social status. It must be measured by the heart, kindness, and the ability to love unconditionally. As the darkness begins to cover the garden, Catherine and Gladys rise from the bench, gently walking together along the flower-covered path. Catherine knows that today's conversation might be the last time she and Gladys can share such a moment, but the words she spoke, the values she passed on, will forever be etched in her heart. Before leaving, Catherine stops, embraces Gladys, and tears fall from her eyes in overwhelming emotion. She whispers softly in the ear of this noble woman, "Thank you, Gladys. You didn't just help me wake up. You taught me how to live a life that truly matters. I will never forget this." Gladys gently pats Catherine's back, her voice as soft as the rustling leaves in the wind. "As long as you remember the lesson from today, live sincerely, and never lose yourself, I will always be with you, no matter where you go." The two women share an emotional glance, then slowly leave the garden. Catherine knows that from this moment forward, she has found the right path to walk for the rest of her life, a path illuminated by kindness, humility, and above all the unconditional love Gladys Sullivan has shown her. Now, Catherine walks with a peaceful heart, ready to face the future, a future no longer overshadowed by prejudice and selfishness, but one filled with the light of kindness, empathy, and the true value of humanity. In life, we often judge others based on their appearance, race, or preconceived notions. But through today's touching story of Gladys and Catherine, we understand that the true value of a person always lies deep within the heart, in kindness, sincerity, and the ability to change when one realizes their mistakes. What about you? Have you or someone you know ever been judged wrongly because of their appearance, race, or circumstances? Share your story in the comments below so we can spread the message of love and equality. If you found today's story meaningful and touching, please like the video, share it so more people can know, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us with more inspiring stories in the future. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.